Hi, everyone. You've probably seen photos of ancient buildings buried up to their windows or even higher. For many of you, this seems strange, and we have several unanswered questions. How high were these buildings buried? Who, and most importantly, with what did they dig out these huge volumes of soil? Where did they put all that earth? And why was it even necessary to dig out the buildings? In this story, we will delve into the deepest secrets hidden beneath the streets of American cities. We will transport ourselves to Seattle, a city built on a hilly isthmus where, according to official history, in the early 20th century, city authorities decided to regrade the landscape, moving over 49 million cubic yards of earth. It sounds like a massive project, but was it the only reason? We will also look into Kansas, located far from the ocean, where photographs show a strange landscape resembling sand dunes and buried buildings reaching up to 2 stories. The official version speaks of sandstorms, but could they have moved such an enormous amount of earth? Watch and listen to the end, because our story will tell you not only about the dust and dirt, but also about the people who may have witnessed events that completely changed their world. Are you ready to discover the truth hidden beneath the city streets? Let's go. Chapter 1. Legacy and Skepticism. Liam Stanton, a young historian whose dissertation on urban development in early 20th century Seattle was nearly complete, sat in his late grandfather's small, dusty apartment. The smell of old paper, mothballs, and something else undefinable permeated every corner. His grandfather, a grumpy old man and an adherent of alternative history, had spent his life trying to prove that his native Seattle was not merely regraded, but was unearthed from layers of earth left after an unknown catastrophe. Liam, of course, considered this nonsense, but he respected his grandfather and viewed his theories as a charming eccentricity. He had received the keys to the apartment yesterday and was now sorting through his grandfather's belongings. A mountain of junk, indeed, he thought, setting aside another box filled with newspaper clippings and printouts from dubious websites. He was firm in his conviction. After all, the official documents he had studied for years clearly described the street regrading project under the direction of R.H. Thompson. Canals, hydraulic cannons, conveyor belts, it was all documented. It was simply a grand construction project, not some mystical unearthing. Suddenly, his gaze fell on an old wooden chest locked with a rusty padlock. Liam didn't remember his grandfather ever opening it in front of him. He found a key tied to an old tag with the inscription, "For you only, Liam." Inside the chest were thick, leather-bound diaries, old photographs neatly arranged in envelopes, and several yellowed maps. Finally, a farewell gift for his favorite skeptical grandson. He opened one of the diaries. His grandfather's uneven handwriting, his thoughts on the mystery of the buried buildings, his arguments with the official version seemed even more naive to Liam now that he held them in his hands. But something made him pause. His grandfather detailed how he had talked with old construction workers who had worked on those very projects in Seattle. He mentioned that they spoke of unexplainably dense soil and how they had to wash it out using powerful hydraulic cannons, just like gold prospectors did in Alaska. His grandfather emphasized that it wasn't just soil, but a frozen mass composed of mud, silt, and animal bones. Well, that's just pure fantasy, he thought, but something inside him made him open the folder with the photographs. He saw familiar pictures, Seattle in the early 20th century, huge mounds of earth, buildings half buried underground. But in one photograph he had never seen before, there was something strange. In the foreground stood an old man looking directly at the camera, and in the background, a crane was visible lifting a huge block of ice with frozen tree branches inside. The photo was clearly captioned, "Battery Street, 1912, unloading from a grader." Liam frowned. Battery Street was precisely the location where, according to the official version, those glacial hills were located. But why was a crane lifting a block of ice and not just earth? And why, according to the documents, should there have been only hills in this place and not permafrost like in Alaska? These questions swirled in his head like a whirlwind, making his heart beat faster. His grandfather, it seems, wasn't so crazy after all. He picked up the old yellow diary and began to read it from the very beginning, now not with mockery, but with deep, unsettling curiosity. Perhaps the official history he had considered unshakable was just a beautiful legend concealing something far more incredible. Chapter 2: Maya Skepticism and the Old Architect. Liam sat at his desk in his apartment, surrounded by scattered pages from his grandfather's diaries and yellowed photographs. A week had passed, and he still couldn't bring himself to return to his dissertation. His academic advisor, Professor Harrison, had called several times, asking about his progress, but Liam had brushed him off with vague phrases. Only one thought occupied his mind. What if Grandpa was right? Just then, Maya, his friend and a budding blogger with bright pink hair, appeared in the doorway. She was holding 2 cups of coffee. "Hey, reclusive historian, what are you doing? You've got cobwebs in your hair already," she said, smiling. Seeing the documents strewn across the desk, her eyes lit up. "Whoa, is that your grandpa's collection? I thought you threw it out." "Hey, no, I'm just sorting through it. And you know, there's something interesting here." Liam showed her the photograph with the block of ice. Maya took the picture and studied it carefully. "Unloading from a grader. I don't see a grader here. And what's with the ice?" "Exactly. According to official records, they were leveling glacial hills. But in other photos I found in the diaries, they're using hydraulic cannons to wash the soil, like in Alaska when they're looking for gold," Liam explained. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Well, maybe to keep the dust down, or to make the soil softer." "Maybe." But Grandpa wrote that the construction workers told him about some mud mass that kept breaking their shovels and excavators, and that it contained animal bones. Entire animals, you understand? Frozen. Whoa! So your grandpa believed Seattle was built on mammoth bones? That sounds like a great idea for a video. "This isn't for a video, Maya. This is my work, my dissertation. I can't just believe it. I need evidence. Official, undeniable evidence." Liam tried to reason with her. "Then look for it. Film videos, ask questions, investigate. We can go to the city library, look at old newspapers, find anyone who might still remember something," Maya suggested. Their argument was interrupted by a call on his grandfather's landline. Liam reluctantly picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was old-fashioned, with a raspy quality. "Liam Stanton, this is Harry O'Connor. I was a friend of your grandfather's. He asked me to contact you if you ever found his chest. I've been waiting, and I know you found it. I need to show you something." Liam exchanged glances with Maya. Excitement was written all over her face. He took a deep breath, realizing that his life, his academic career, might never be the same. The skepticism he had cherished for years was beginning to melt away like ice under the scorching sun. Chapter 3: Harry O'Connor and the Old Maps. The next day, Liam and Maya went to meet Harry O'Connor. His address led them to one of Seattle's oldest neighborhoods, where buildings that had survived the regrading and unearthing still stood. An elderly but energetic man with a gray beard and kind, perceptive eyes opened the door. He was wearing an old tweed jacket, and a pen was sticking out of his pocket. "Liam Stanton, you're the spitting image of your grandpa, just not as gray-haired. And this, I presume, is your companion, Maya. I'm glad to see you. Please, come in." Harry's apartment was like a museum, or more accurately, an archive. Antique maps, blueprints, books, and photographs were spread everywhere. A huge, detailed map of Seattle from the early 20th century hung on the wall. "Your grandfather was a wonderful man. He knew that Official history is only the small part of the truth, Harry said, pouring them tea. He asked me not to tell you anything until you started asking the right questions yourself. And by the looks of it, you have. Liam showed him the photograph with the block of ice. Harry nodded. Yes, that's one of his finds. You know, I was an architectural engineer myself. I worked on many projects, and I saw how they built here in Seattle. I saw them unearthing these buildings. Maya, unable to contain herself, interjected. But how? Official history says they were just leveling hills. Harry smirked. Leveling, you say? Yes, they were leveling, but not just hills. They were leveling what was left of an ancient catastrophe. This earth, this soil, it wasn't ordinary soil. It was permafrost, eternal frozen ground, frozen mud, clay, silt, and bones. Bones of mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and something else we couldn't identify. All of it was buried under a layer of ice, and they were trying to get rid of it all to build the city. But why isn't this written anywhere? Why is there not a single word about this in official documents? Liam asked, feeling his academic world crumble. And who do you think benefits from that? Imagine that Seattle is being built not just on hills, but on a massive graveyard of prehistoric animals buried under a layer of mud. Who would buy land here? Who would want to build a house here? It was a grand conspiracy, Liam. The authorities decided it was easier to say they were leveling the landscape than to admit that the city was buried after some global catastrophe. People would have been scared, and they would have asked even more questions. Harry walked to the wall and pointed at the map. Here, look, this is a map from 1900. See, the streets and buildings that were unearthed are marked here. And here, next to it, is the official map from 1910. There was not a single word about those streets on it. They were simply erased, as if they never existed. Maya, peering at the map, mumbled, "My God, this is amazing. This is a scoop. I have to film this." Calm down, Maya. It's not a scoop. It's the truth. The truth your grandfather tried to find his whole life. And I think you, Liam, are the one who can uncover it.
Chapter 4. The Underground World and a Call to Kansas. After the meeting with Harry O'Connor, Liam and Maya returned to his grandfather's apartment in complete silence. The enormous puzzle they had just begun to assemble seemed both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. For Maya, it was the embodiment of a dream for viral content. For Liam, it was the collapse of his entire academic life. We have to film this right now. The City Under the City, How Seattle Authorities Hid a Global Catastrophe. Maya was already coming up with the title. Her eyes were burning with anticipation. No, Maya, wait. You don't understand. Liam stopped abruptly. If we just release this, we'll be laughed at. I'll lose my degree. Harry will be accused of falsification. We need undeniable proof that this isn't just the fantasy of some old eccentric. We need to verify everything he said. But we have the photos and the maps and those diaries, Maya argued. Yes, but these are only circumstantial evidence. I have to find official documents that contradict this or, on the contrary, confirm it. I have to find proof that those old streets Harry showed on the map were truly erased. Their argument continued in the apartment. While Maya edited a short teaser for her channel, Liam immersed himself in his grandfather's diaries again. He was looking for any clue, any mention that could lead him to the official documents hidden from the public. And he found one. In one of his diaries, his grandfather wrote, "I spoke with a certain Mr. Smith from Kansas. He told me about sand waves that covered their city. They also unearthed buildings, but not from mud, but from sand. He sent me several photographs. It's astonishing how similar these stories are. although the reasons he believes are different. Seattle, water. Kansas, wind. I should go there someday. Kansas, of course, Liam exclaimed. What about Kansas? What are you talking about? Remember, Kansas was mentioned in our text. Grandpa corresponded with someone from there who was also involved in buried cities. That's our next step. We have to find this Mr. Smith, or at least his descendants. Maybe they also have diaries, photos, some documents. If we can prove this happened not only in Seattle, but also in Kansas, then it's no longer just a local burial, but something much more massive. Liam picked up his phone and started searching for information about the old photographs of Kansas mentioned in the text. He quickly found several pictures showing buildings buried almost to the second floor, and a strange, dune-like landscape around them. He also found mentions of sandstorms. You know, Grandpa was right when he said there were different reasons in different places. In Seattle, water, mud, permafrost. In Kansas, sand, storms, Liam said thoughtfully. That's perfect, Maya exclaimed. We'll film a video about Seattle, show the evidence, and then announce that our investigation is leading us to Kansas. This will be an amazing series. Millions of views, I guarantee it. Liam looked at her. Her words, of course, made sense, but for him, this wasn't just a show. It was an attempt to restore the truth his grandfather had sought for so long, and he felt it was only the beginning. Chapter 5: The Journey to Kansas and the Mystery of the Sand Dunes. The journey to Kansas for Liam and Maya was not just a change of scenery, but a symbolic transition from theory to practice. In Seattle, they relied on diaries, photographs, and the words of an old architect. In Kansas, they were to immerse themselves in a completely different environment, not the sea breeze, but the hot wind of the Great Plains. Not frozen silt and mud, but dry, loose sand. Maya, of course, documented every step, filming for her audience who was already eagerly awaiting the next installment. Look, guys, we've left rainy Seattle and are now heading to the heart of America, to Kansas, where, according to our data, there's also a secret hidden underground. Subscribe so you don't miss the continuation of our investigation, she announced to the camera. Liam, sitting next to her, just sighed heavily. He still felt out of place. A historian who, instead of sitting in an archive, was traveling across the country in search of answers that could destroy his career? That sounded like a bad joke. But curiosity, fueled by every word from his grandfather's diaries, was stronger. Arriving in Kansas, their first stop was the local library to find old newspapers and documents mentioned in his grandfather's diaries. They quickly found the photographs his grandfather had described. They showed buildings buried almost up to the second floor and wavy, dune-like hills all around them. Liam couldn't tear his eyes off these pictures. The official history of Kansas stated that these hills were simply a feature of the local landscape, and the buried buildings were the result of sandstorms. But something about this explanation didn't add up. Hey, why are there so few trees here? Maya pointed to a photo with only a few small solitary trees. Your grandpa wrote about this in his diaries too. The wind would need hundreds of years and an open space to move that much sand. But if there were no trees, what was happening here? That's exactly what I was thinking, Liam replied. The official version says sandstorms covered the city, but sandstorms usually damage and scatter structures. Yet here, just like in Seattle, the buildings stood firm. Why? How? They decided to find the descendants of Mr. Smith, his grandfather's friend. To their surprise, they found his grandson, an old farmer named John, who lived on the outskirts of the city. John was a quiet man but good-natured, who immediately recognized the name Stanton. Your grandfather was a good man, he said, offering them fresh milk. He believed what we all saw. He said it wasn't just sand, it was dust. Huge volumes of dust and soil. And what did you see? Liam asked impatiently. We saw the city drowning in dust several times a year, but it wasn't ordinary dust,
It was dry earth, and then after a while it just solidified like stone. My father said it was as if the earth just jumped out of the ground and settled. But no one believed him. Everyone thought it was just sandstorms, and that they just needed to be cleared away. John waved his hand, pointing to the hills in the distance. And then they just disappeared and everyone forgot, as if it never happened. But my grandfather kept those photographs in your grandfather's letters. He believed that one day the truth would surface.
Chapter 6. The Secret of the Kansas Underground. After talking with John, Liam and Maya realized their investigation had reached a new level. Now they had not only diaries and photographs, but also a living witness who confirmed his grandfather's theory. John, moved by their enthusiasm, decided to show them something else. He led them to the edge of his field, where an old, dilapidated staircase leading downwards was hidden among the weeds. My grandfather said this was the entrance to one of the old underground streets, John said. After the city was buried, people just built on top, and the old first floors became basements, or, as they said in the family, the underground city. No one wanted to remember what had been there before. Descending the rickety wooden steps, Liam and Maya found themselves in complete darkness. The air was damp and heavy. Liam turned on his phone's flashlight, and its beam caught an old brick wall from the darkness. On it was a sign, faded by time, with the inscription, "Mr. Smith's Shop." It's the very shop from the photograph," Maya whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "It's true. It's not just a legend." Liam, as a historian, was thrilled. He carefully touched the wall. The bricks were covered with a layer of hardened clay-like soil. This was not the sand official version spoke of. It was that very permafrost, the eternal frozen ground that his grandfather had written about in his diaries. Their eyes grew accustomed to the dim light, and they began to make out objects: old rusty shelves, broken bottles, some pieces of wood. Liam suddenly bent down and picked something up from the floor. It was a small, time-darkened leather-bound booklet. He opened it. Inside were some notes and drawings. It was the diary of Mr. Smith, his grandfather's friend. "We found it," Maya exclaimed. "We found it! Now we have his story and his testimony." At that moment, a rustle came from somewhere in the darkness. Liam and Maya froze. In the distance, at the very end of the underground passage, a shadow flickered. "Who's there?" Liam called out. "You shouldn't be here," a hoarse elderly voice replied. "No one was supposed to find this. It was meant to stay underground." Their hearts beat even faster. The mysterious old eccentric from the diaries, the conspiracy Harry had talked about, all of it suddenly took on a new, frightening meaning. This was no longer just a historical investigation. It was a dangerous game, and they had just made their first move. Chapter 7. The Guardian. The shadow slowly emerged into the light cast by Liam's flashlight. It was an old man, thin and tall, with gray hair tied in a bun at the back of his head. His eyes, deep-set and wise, carefully studied the uninvited guests. In his hand, he held an old wooden cane, and a small, curious owl sat on his shoulders. The old man looked as if he himself was a part of this ancient dungeon. His clothes were faded and dusty, and the skin on his face resembled cracked earth. "My name is Silas," he said, his voice sounding like the rustle of autumn leaves. "I am the guardian of these places, the guardian of this secret. But you were not supposed to be here. I had to make sure no one would learn the truth." Liam, despite his fear, gathered his courage. We didn't mean to. We were just looking for the truth. We found your grandfather's diary." Silas looked at the booklet in Liam's hand. His gaze was long and appraising. "Mr. Smith was my grandfather. He knew that one day someone would come, and that this someone might be connected to his friend, your grandfather. He left this for you, but he also left me. I had to make sure you were worthy of this knowledge." Maya, despite her fear, couldn't help herself. What knowledge? What happened here? Why was this kept a secret? Silas sighed heavily. "Sit down. I will tell you. A long time ago, when we lived here under these streets, we witnessed something incredible. Several times a year, just as my grandfather said, dust fell from the sky. It covered the city, and people hid in their homes. And then it solidified, turning into stone. It was as if the earth breathed. It spat out its dust and then sucked it back in. We didn't know what it was. We called it the breath of the earth." He paused, his eyes wandering over the old walls as if he were reliving those events. "The breath of the earth," Liam repeated, his historian's mind trying to fit this information into a familiar framework. But why? Why was this happening? "We thought it was related to comets, to some planetary cycles. We didn't know for sure, but we knew it was dangerous. We lost many people. And then, when it was time to rebuild the city, the authorities decided that people didn't need to know the truth. They were afraid of panic, afraid that people would start asking questions for which there were no answers. They were afraid the city would be abandoned. So they decided to hide all of it, underground. And that is how our underground city came to be." Silas led them on, showing them the old streets, buried up to their windows. Signs were still visible on the walls. Pieces of furniture lay on the floor, and old rusty bicycles were piled in a corner. It was a ghost city, frozen in time. Maya, holding her breath, filmed everything, her hands trembling with excitement. Liam, lost in thought, carefully touched the walls. The bricks were covered with a layer of hardened, clay-like soil. This was not the sand official version spoke of. It was that very permafrost, the eternal frozen ground that his grandfather had written about in his diaries.
Chapter 8. At a Crossroads. Returning to the surface, Liam and Maya were in a state of turmoil. In their hands, they held not just a story, but a bomb that could detonate the entire academic world. Maya, sitting in the car, was already imagining the headlines. Ancient catastrophe, U.S. authorities hid the truth about buried cities. Kansas secrets, how the breath of the earth changed history. She was frantically sorting through the footage she had managed to capture. "We have to release this right now," she said, her eyes burning with excitement. "It'll be the scoop of the century. Millions of views. We'll be stars." "No, Maya, wait," Liam stopped her. His tone was serious, almost pleading. "This isn't just a story. It's people's lives. Silas, his family, everyone who lived here. They chose silence for the sake of... for what? For peace. And who are we to break that? We can't just take all this and dump it on the public without thoroughly checking everything. We'll be accused of falsification, I'll lose my academic degree, and Harry and Silas will be called crazy." Maya, in turn, was furious. "We're historians, we're journalists. Our job is to seek and tell the truth. We can't just ignore all of this. This isn't a show, Liam. It's our duty to history." Their argument continued late into the night. Liam sat in his grandfather's study, surrounded by old diaries and maps. He reread every line, trying to find evidence that could support Silas's words. He recalled his grandfather's words, his persistence, his belief that the truth would surface sooner or later. He looked at the old photographs, trying to see in them what he hadn't seen before. Not just hills, but solidified mud. Not just sand dunes, but layers of ancient dust. Everything was jumbled in his head. On one side, his dissertation,
his career, his reputation. On the other, the truth he had been searching for, and which he could no longer ignore. He understood that if he just released everything he had found, he would face ruin. But if he remained silent, he would betray his grandfather's memory and everything he had sought. Liam was at a crossroads. He knew he had to act, but how? He had to find a way to tell the truth without destroying his own life and the lives of those he trusted. Chapter 9. The Revelation. Liam spent several sleepless nights. He reread his grandfather's and Mr. Smith's diaries, studied the maps, and compared them. He was looking for any, even the smallest clues that could confirm Silas's words. And he found them. In old Seattle newspapers he had studied for years, there were articles about unusual rains and strange dust falling from the sky. In the official documents he had studied, there were mentions of unexplained delays in construction due to unexpectedly dense soil. It was all there, right under his nose, but he simply had failed to pay attention. He realized that he couldn't just release this. He had to present it as a historical discovery. He called his academic advisor, Professor Harrison, and told him everything. To his surprise, the professor didn't laugh. He listened carefully, asked questions, and then asked Liam to come to the university. A few weeks later, Liam stood on a podium in a large auditorium with dozens of scholars, journalists, and historians sitting before him. Next to him, on a huge screen, were photographs from Seattle and Kansas, maps and pages from the diaries. Official history tells us that this was regrading, but I believe it was something else. It was an unearthing, and it was an unearthing after an unknown catastrophe that buried our cities. We don't know what it was. Perhaps it was sandstorms as in Kansas, or perhaps it was something else. But we know one thing. The official history was written to reassure people, and now it's time to rewrite it. Maya, sitting in the front row, filmed everything. She was no longer thinking about views. She was thinking about the truth, about her grandfather, and about how they had finally managed to find it. Epilogue. Several years passed. Liam, now Professor Stanton, sat in his office, surrounded by books and documents. His dissertation, rewritten to include all the new facts, had become a bestseller. He was no longer a skeptic. He was a pioneer. Maya became a renowned journalist. Her documentary film about the buried cities won numerous awards and opened the eyes of thousands of people. She continued her investigation, and new heroes appeared in her films, people from other cities who also found underground cities and strange dust. Liam often returned to Kansas and Seattle. He looked at the old buildings now with understanding. He saw not just bricks and stone, but a history that had been buried underground, waiting for its time to be told. He often reread his grandfather's diaries, his reflections on the mystery of the buried buildings. "I was right, Grandpa," he whispered softly, looking at an old photograph. "The truth has surfaced. Finally."